It's Lisbeth from Persistence U Podcast with Lisbeth. Of course, find me at lameredith.com and jump onto my email list. This week on Persistence U, I had David Crow, a mighty author who wrote The PaleFaced Lie. And I just wanted to break down a couple of the things we talked about over the next few days. Today, I want to talk a little bit about one of the themes, which was when parents force kids to choose allegiances during a divorce or custody battle. Allegiances for one parent, pitting one parent against the other, rather pitting the child against a parent, or pitting the child against siblings. Any kind of divisive nature like that in a family is just so incredibly damaging to a child. And he wrote such an amazing book, and his book kind of mirrored my own book and life in certain ways we discussed, because in my own family of origin, there were definitely decisions that children had to make as to which team they were on. My mother, who divorced a good bit, if she thought that a child was showing any favor to a father, that child would be kicked out of the house. If my mother had an issue with one of her kids and found out the others of us were speaking to that child, even though that child was probably under the age of 14 at the time, we would get horrifyingly punished at times. And so you definitely knew that you needed to be on Team Mom. And there are all kinds of families that I've worked with in the years that I worked in child abuse investigation, in domestic abuse, in juvenile probation, who knew that they were supposed to be showing their loyalty to only the certain parent or siblings. They felt the division and they lived it. I just want to remind people, if you're ever going through a separation in your family situation or a divorce, children don't need to feel like they had any part of creating the dissension, and they certainly should never feel like they have to choose which side to be on of an argument that they did not even create. And I see this, one of my siblings is in dire health. She is at the end of her life, and she spoke recently about the fact that our family has never been back together. All the siblings on my mom's side of the family, 6 of us, ever since my mom took a few of us and disappeared, we've never all been back together. It's been more than 50 years since that happened. And we've never all been in the same room. She is the oldest child in that sibling group. And so for her, and I'm going to say she was 12 years old when that happened, she'd always felt the need to protect us kids, to keep us safe when our mom was volatile or if there was abuse going on in the home between a parent or parent figures. And then suddenly all the children were separated, it seemed like, from each other, and they were. Like, I didn't meet my brother, my final brother, till I was over 50 years old. We've never been back together, and she had felt like when she was young, that was somehow her responsibility to protect us, her responsibility to keep us together, her responsibility to make sure everyone was happy. It's never a child's responsibility to do any of that. But she talked about just a couple of weeks ago that was something in her lifetime she was never able to heal over. She's never had her siblings back together, and that ache is of a life of hers that has had many pains and many joys as well. That has been the most painful thing to endure. When children go through too many toxic traumas, you probably know this, but I'm just going to say it, when they have too many toxic traumas growing up, different than just bad things happening, too many toxic traumas and isolation and parents doing that kind of crap, then children often grow up to have things like substance abuse problems or mental health problems, behavioral issues, trouble in school, concentrating, trouble flourishing, trouble in their later relationships, suicidality, all kinds of issues. And I know in my own book, Pieces of Me, Rescuing My Kidnapped Daughters, I talk about the adverse childhood experiences studies. It's important to look at what we've gone through in our lives and take stock of that, because it's hard to be able to move forward and get where we want to be if we don't know where we are and how we got there in the first place. So books like The PaleFaced Lie, The Conversation with David Crow, unbelievably helpful, because when he shares his story, it allows you to share your own story, even if it's just in your head. And, mentally going over some things and not feeling shame or isolation or whatever. So loved this podcast episode, and I'll be back to discuss a couple of the other talk points that we went over in the podcast.